Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. Today, we're joined by John Ghiorso. John built Orca Pacific from an accidental start into an 8-figure, 100-person Amazon agency before executing a major exit in 2022 to Sir Martin Sorrell's S4 Capital and Media.Monks. After fulfilling a short earnout, he then launched VantaFive, a venture studio where he's systematically building and scaling the next generation of tech-enabled B2B agencies. It's a whole host of information about rigor that allows you to transact with some of the largest strategics in the world to what it's like to be post-exit and not be done building. Let's dive in. All right, John, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so you didn't have an extensive career and background before starting an agency. Just so we understand that you're one of us, John, how did you become an agency owner?
Yeah, I had the classic sort of accidental agency owner story. I had no idea what I was doing. I got involved with a small family company, my late dad's company, right out of college. It was 2008. It was the Great Recession. I couldn't get a job anywhere else. So my dad said, "Hey, I'll pay you on commission." Long story short, I ended up, he had a sort of a manufacturer's rep company, so like a brokerage. I ended up hustling, going to trade shows, pretty quickly understanding that there was an opportunity to sell Amazon expertise. And I say that in the sort of most narrow way possible. Our service in the beginning was literally setting up Vendor Central accounts and listing products on the site. That was our service. So I wouldn't say we were an agency, right? It's like I was doing that. They would pay me a small commission. And I realized like, oh, if I get like more of these clients, I make more commission. Like it was like, it was very kind of simple-minded at the time. I was 23 years old. Anyway, I did that for several years, kind of built up effectively a book of business, realized there was more and more work that could be done for these clients, started building out work, realized I needed more people to do that, hired some people, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I think this is an agency. And I had to like Google what's an agency. So that was like early days.
A performance agency at that.
Yeah, correct. I sort of learned as I went. And then, I did that for about 10 years, built it up to about a 100-person actual agency, full service, all the things and parts and growth team and all of that. But, it was a slow kind of bootstrap building process for about a decade.
So you were an accidental agency owner. Where did you source your education? I mean, of course, trial by fire, but do you remember some of those resources, people you hired or places you went to learn about being a leader, being a professional?
Yeah, it was mostly books. It was mostly just, I don't do this as much now, but back when I was in full entrepreneur, like grinding, obsessed mode, I would read a business book every week. So my goal was to read 50 business books a year. And I did that for probably 10 years. So like, it's a lot of like knowledge. Not all of it's frankly that useful.
But unofficial mentors. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So like I just shoved all this kind of related knowledge into my mind and started building kind of triangulating a worldview on how to actually go out and do this the right way.
Did your team go, oh, John read another book? And when you came with new words? Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? They weren't, to be honest, I think maybe they were just like telling me what I wanted to hear, but they were pretty leaned in. Like I would have a month. So I would read 4 books a month, but then we would do a book club with all my leadership and we'd read one of those books every month. And I actually found that to be really useful, to be honest.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I had a similar progression as an accidental agency owner from 2010. And it was my own imposter syndrome and just not knowing what it was I was building that I just read tirelessly and created an internal MBA program, which was basically the list of books I was reading and then teaching people, which was quite rewarding. It made it collaborative. Do you have any call outs, anything that you thought were unlocks at the time that took the agency from one level to another?
Yeah, I'll give a couple book recommendations. I don't know if I read all these back in the day, but they're definitely like on my top list. Some are kind of obscure, so they may be new ones. There's a book called Getting Naked, which is like written in the 90s. I think it's Patrick Lencioni. It to me just like completely encapsulates what an agency should strive to be. I will say just generally Seth Godin's books are always great in terms of marketing and how to approach sort of like value creation. Unreasonable Hospitality is absolute top 5 agency owner must read, both for you as a leader, and I would give it to your entire staff. It is just like, it encapsulates the kind of service mindset more than any book I've ever read. It's also very engaging. I'm a big EOS guy. in terms of using that as the system I run businesses on. So I've read all the EOS books, Traction, and there's like 5 others. Those are all good. And then last one I'll list is a book called Who, like WHO, and I think it's the A Method for Hiring. And it's a brilliant blueprint for evaluating talent, basically.
Yeah, all wonderful recommendations. I would only add one variation. If you got to a 100-person team, so you were able to stay within EOS, I love Vern's scaling up as a juxtaposition to the enterprise version of it for those who are operationally minded. But you ran the agency EOS. When did you do your EOS conversion? Because that would have been probably many years into the journey.
It was
for you.
several, yeah. So I had this kind of like, I think of Orca, my first business, in kind of 2 big phases. One was like a lifestyle phase, where it was really me, a flat delivery team. I was doing all the sales. We weren't really doing any marketing. It was just like, it was like pure margin lifestyle. Let's like squeeze this for all it's worth. And then there was the second phase, which was like, I wanted to make a real business. I wanted to grow top line significantly. I wanted to, build a growth team. I built a back office, like all that kind of stuff. And at that point, I think it was in 2016 where I implemented EOS as part of that kind of process. So I think I sold the company in 2020. So I think I had EOS in earnest pre sort of exit for about 4 years and found it to be very, very effective. And now I use it as like just the default system in all my new companies, and it works very well.
When you started installing this, you were thinking, okay, well, I go from having to explain this business model to people because it's not really well known to, it's a growing category. There's competition. There's companies that look like you, doppelgangers,
Yep.
And you're growing as a recruitment company with talent and people. When did you think, hey, I'm going to sell this at some point?
So it basically was when I decided to make it a real business. I decided to make it a real business because I wanted to sell it. It was all sort of the same decision. And I knew it would take me years to get there. But, I essentially, I don't want to say I saw the walls closing in. That's a little dramatic. But I just saw a lot of new entrants into the market. And I knew that running this thing as like a lifestyle business where I had literally zero churn and I would just like talk to prospects myself and sign them and like realize that I kind of had it easy because the domain I was in was so hot and it was so underserved for so many years. And then that was, at some point it's free market, right? People see the opportunity, they jump in as they should. I saw that starting to happen in like a pretty dramatic way. And I knew I had to kind of like get more serious. And then eventually I was going to have to be part of a bigger organization if I wanted to survive. Because I was going to get like nipped at the heels by all the little guys. And then I was going to get squeezed at the top by the big guys coming in. And I just didn't want to be like stuck in the middle there.
Yeah. That's very astute observation because it was in a 10-year expanding market. You stepped into the business world not at the best time for our market. And then you're riding a digital wave, e-commerce wave. And then to see that, hey, this is going to be an environment that I'm going to need to take this seriously to survive and continue to thrive is kind of mature for, how old would you have been at the time?
So
30 something?
Yeah, I think that was about 30, maybe 32 or something. Yeah, that was kind of the point at which I made that decision. I've always, frankly, one of my strengths has always been kind of like understanding where the world's going to go. I'm like pretty good at sort of projecting out a few steps into the future. I do have a bias though of often thinking things are going to happen faster than they do. So I have to kind of be careful about that and check that. I will say I'm impressed by Amazon agency founders who are still like, they're still independently owned. They're still succeeding. And I'm just looking at them going like, God, that's got to be tough. Like, it's got to be so hard. Cause like, I just had it so easy on a relative basis. I could count my competitors on one hand. Last time I looked on Clutch, there's 3,000 Amazon agencies. That's like mind blowing to me. I literally knew all my competitors. Like I knew them by name anyway. So I kind of prefer that, to be honest. I don't want to make things hard on myself, but anyway, good for them. They're fighting the good fight.
Yeah. A privileged position to sit in once you're out of the sector, John. So
yeah, for sure.
For those who don't know, in 2020, some aggregators showed up. So people were putting a lot of money behind consolidations in this space. And that's when you saw the writing on the wall. Maybe talk about the environment that ultimately had you sell earlier than you thought.
Yeah. So our plan in 2019 was to go to market in 2021. We thought that would be about the right time from a revenue standpoint. We were getting our audit done on our financials and GAAP compliant, like kind of putting all the stuff in place to be able to do that. And then COVID happened, and we thought the world was going to end, and everybody had no idea what was going to go on. Are we going to have to shut down the business? 2 months later, we realized, oh, this is like weirdly a good thing for our business. Obviously, hopefully once in a lifetime event. And then the weirdest pivot to maybe this is a tailwind for us. And then all of a sudden, all the buyers that we were like loosely sort of courting and talking to in a very casual way, because we're like, oh, we're not ready. It's probably next year. All of a sudden, like came back in full force. And it was a bit of a bidding war, and it's just, you're better lucky than good sometimes, right? So like the timing was clearly in our favor. Yeah, we could have gotten the company a little bigger. We just decided now's the time. We have some pretty frothy buyers, some great names, and ultimately, we picked S4 Capital / Media.Monks as the one we went with.
Yeah, you are the talk of the town as a category. For those who remember, we had a period of time where retail didn't contribute anything to major brands, and Amazon and e-com for the first time outperformed traditional retail. And so everyone's like, oh, we must be late to the game. We must have this capability. What was it like having such an aggressive suitor environment?
It was great. It was... you're the belle of the ball. In a weird way, you're the belle of the ball, but the ball is not actually happening in real life. It's happening over Zoom calls. Like that was the other very weird part about it, is where, having conversations about selling a company to people, many of whom I never met in person, and I had no opportunity to meet in person. I mean, this really is in like the throes of like not 2021 where stuff had kind of started like half open up. It was like really in the throes of don't get near anyone on the street, COVID, and like, so yeah. No one's on planes, no one's going to offices, everything's closed. And, we're just having these conversations over Zoom, but, valuations were good. And it was all very exciting. It was all very exciting. I probably got a little cocky, at times, but, other than that, I think I managed it fairly well. And, I'm happy with the decision I made. I would not expect that to happen again. Like it was just that COVID was such an extreme event. Like it just pushed things to highs and lows that was just so kind of artificial and strange that, I wouldn't bank on that again in the future, nor would I want to. But yeah, it was, it was great. It was all very exciting.
Well, let's talk about it. So I became known because during COVID, right after that event, I did 3 acquisitions in 90 days.
Yep.
And just like you described, there was no hopping on planes and taking people out to steak dinners. It was Zoom calls. And because all of us were not able to travel, we just stacked Zoom calls. And so you could really process a lot of opportunity rather quickly because it wasn't as exhausting or distracting as the typical courtship process demands.
Yeah.
And is right to be cocky. With that much demand and you're the hot supply, did you bring on anybody to help you take advantage of the strategic value, the transactions?
Yep. We use an investment bank, GP Bullhound. They were great. They were, it's, for me, this is like, okay, this is I own one company and I can sell it one time. And like these guys do this, every month they're selling another company. Just the pattern recognition and connections. I know I sound like I'm getting a cutback or something, but like really like using an investment bank for me, it's a lot of money, but it was just like, this is the biggest transaction I will ever go through probably in my entire life. Like I just want to make sure I do it the right way. So that was absolutely the right decision. And then I had a good lawyer too, who is, I would say, a guy who had M&A experience and was very like, had my back, but also deal friendly. Like he wanted to get the deal done, right? Which is like some lawyers just want to bog things down forever. And that's like, at the end of the day, like, we're trying to get this deal done. So he was kind of aligned in terms of approach and attitude as well to the momentum of the deal, which was, still like watching my back, but that was great. And then don't sleep on the accountants too. The accountants are important. Because like a lot of the sort of post-deal haggling, if you will, it comes fundamentally down to the numbers, both the numbers before the deal was done and then the numbers like in the earnout. So having aggressive accountants is actually, I would say, underappreciated as a kind of member of your team.
Yeah. So, I mean, you sounds like put the right professional team in place and you had those people already identified because you were running the business that way. Were you a remote offices? Like, what was the composition of the company?
Yeah. So we were, and this was way before COVID, we had an interesting, I guess I would call it hybrid. So we had a system where we're in Seattle. All of our employees were in Seattle, but we had essentially a flexible work from home, work from the office setup. So we had an office, we're in Seattle, but if people didn't have a reason to be in the office, meaning they didn't have a client meeting, they didn't have a team meeting, they could work from home. And we had this policy for years. I mean, for a decade. And all of a sudden, like COVID happened and it became very like cool all of a sudden and in vogue, which is funny because it was actually kind of a turnoff to some buyers pre-COVID who were sort of looking at us.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because our office was small, like relative to the size of our company, because we didn't need like cubicles for every person that worked for us. So, it actually could make us kind of look smaller than we were. And like they thought it was weird. And maybe it's not like that serious of a company if, people aren't in the office every day. I mean, that was, the pre-COVID sort of mindset. Maybe is weirdly now again the mindset, but then COVID happened. All of a sudden, it was like, wow, this guy's like a visionary for doing this, and I was like, I don't know. It's just like, I mean, that again, just weird luck of timing. But again, that kind of turned also specifically for our little company from a headwind into a tailwind, which was odd. But yeah,
yeah. I mean that's kind of the points of compound for your story. Like accidental situation that is ultimately the type of situation that's appropriate for the circumstance you found yourself in.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're in Seattle, right near Amazon.
Yep.
Working for basically an Amazon agency, building an Amazon agency. You do hybrid and you have COVID that hits and everyone is able to adapt to that sensibly and people are problem solving for that and you don't have that problem. And then you've professionalized the company before the big interest and demand for you sets early from a maybe target, but like you set the table. Hindsight 2020 is great, John, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. One more kind of weird phenomenon though that actually did hurt us a little bit. So one of our kind of core differentiators was that our office was on Amazon's campus, like very literally, right? That was like a big thing for us is we had an office on Amazon's campus. We would walk to their offices. They have like 40 buildings in South Lake Union in Seattle. We would walk to their offices. We would have them over to our offices. We would grab drinks and lunch. And it was just this constant revolving door of their people were at our office, we're at their office. And that was like a big deal for us. And it was a big deal for our clients. And they saw, and there was real value there. And they saw that. The problem with COVID is it actually sort of like leveled the playing field because it was like, yeah, you're in Seattle, but like you're just on Zoom with people now. It doesn't matter. It's all equal. So it was an interesting, I don't know, we made the best of it, but we did lose a little bit of an edge because of that too. So maybe it evened out. I don't know.
Getting into your deal. So you have this 100-person team. It's COVID. You probably hosted a town hall telling everybody, I don't know what's happening to society or to your personal health, but we're positioned well. We're in a category of high demand. And at the same time, you're receiving these inbound inquiries for the business. How did you manage the business while being, the pretty object of everyone's desire?
I tried to, and this is advice I got, I tried to compartmentalize things, right? So I tried to like focus on the business to the same degree that I always would, and then also focus on the deal, and not let one bleed into the other. And I don't know that I literally set like a specific amount of hours for each side of it, but I tried to keep like, okay, this is a 1-hour meeting to talk about the deal. And then I'm going to go back to running the company. And I'm not really going to think about the deal because I'm going to run the company. And then sure, there's another thing on my calendar to talk to a lawyer at 3. Okay, I'm going to do that. And then back to running the company. It was only our executive team knew. And I think that was the right decision until the deal was done. Like, I think eventually we had to tell the next layer down because I think the S4 folks wanted to meet them. So it was like, okay, guys, this is kind of in the final innings. Like it's extremely confidential. So I think, another like 4 people kind of found out a few weeks before, and then we did the deal and then we announced it to the company.
Yeah, that's tough, John.
Yeah.
Did you have a personal life during this?
No, not really. I mean, this was before I had kids, which worked out well for me. No, I mean, I was just working, I would work till 10 or 11 at night. And then I would, wake up at 5 or 6. And I think try to go to the gym for 45 minutes or something in the evening. But that was about it. I would eat and I would just do this. That's all I did. But it was also COVID. So it's like, what else was I going to do?
Yeah, true. Yeah, very true. So
yeah.
you get multiple LOIs. So the bankers do the right thing. They position you. You're getting bids. What did you learn about M&A, about valuing businesses from those initial conversations before you accepted an LOI?
It wasn't radically different than what I expected. And again, I think credit to the bankers. They really prepared me for all this stuff. They were like, this is what's going to happen. And this is probably what it's going to look like. And these are, this is the range of valuations. And this is how it's probably going to be structured. So none of it was like a big surprise. We talked about the negotiating process. You kind of start with big numbers and then you get closer and closer. And it's sort of a funnel as you get closer to the bottom. And then you end up negotiating on stupid little things. I do remember, I don't know if I really learned this. I think in hindsight, I actually was much closer to blowing up the deal than I realized because of the way I was negotiating, which maybe either makes me a brilliant negotiator or just reckless and I got lucky. I'm not sure. But I do remember there were a couple terms where I was just like, no, I'm going to walk away if you don't agree. And they kind of agreed. And in hindsight, they were things that actually weren't that big of a deal. And that's why I said I was probably a little bit cocky, right? I was just like, no. And then they kind of conceded and we ultimately got it done. But I do remember there was a call at some point between my lawyers and their lawyers. And they're like, is he serious? Is this going to happen? Or is he just trying to play games or whatever? And I think my lawyer was like, no, it's happening, but we have concerns or whatever. And it was good that I could be a little bit hot-headed, and then it would get filtered through the diplomats on my team, basically the bankers and the lawyers. And I think that, again, it worked. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it's the confidence of not knowing how close you are to, I mean, I'm sure I would have found another buyer.
Blowing up the deal of your lifetime. Yeah,
exactly. So in hindsight, I'm like, geez, I'm glad my team filtered that and they didn't just say what I said directly.
Well, you touched on lawyers who interact on your behalf.
Yeah.
What was the experience interacting with the strategics, these companies? They're all basically presenting to you the opportunity at large and why they are following for you.
Yeah.
You got to meet some really high caliber folks who've done a lot of meaningful things in the industry, and they're all talking very positively about you. What was that like?
It was great because what I love is having long-term, high-level strategic discussions with other people who are very educated and connected in their world, and I'm educated and connected in my world, and we can sort of triangulate where the world is going. And honestly, a lot of the conversations were that. And if they were like, well, what about this issue with, the way you've categorized this expense or something? I don't know. I'll get back to you. My team will get back to you. So mostly what I focused on was the stuff I think I'm good at and I love, which is what are we doing big picture? Where's the world going? What are we building? What are you building? How could that fit together in a kind of 1 + 1 = 3 way? And that to me is that's my happy place. So I loved it. To be honest, hard questions don't scare me anyway. I've always liked that. It's a challenge. So I didn't get anyone who's a jerk or anything, right? It was some challenging questions, which is totally fair. But I found everyone to be very pleasant overall. The part that was frustrating was the in the weeds negotiation part, where again, that's where I started to get really annoyed. But again, that was okay because I wasn't really doing most of it. It was my team. And so that was the right distribution of kind of labor anyway for skill sets. So.
Well, you've described it well, which is if you build a company that has leadership, that has functional departments that are responsible for accounting, finance, and so they speak to the specifics, and you can make sure it's the right strategic partner for the company going forward and focus on where you're headed, which is S4 has a kind of well-known approach from Sorrell in regards to how he buys companies and how they trade and transact. So they're a known commodity. You also had folks who were just spun up in the 2020 from private equity firms and aggregators. Did you go, yes, S4 Monks versus some of those other aggregators?
I really loved their sort of theory of change and thesis. And it really did feel like a sort of a value additive thesis versus like a lot of the other companies I was talking to were either more traditional holdcos or they were like these private equity backed shops. The traditional holdcos seemed to be a little bit more behind the curve in terms of where the world was going. And the private equity guys mostly just seemed to be focused on like economics, which was fine. Obviously the economics matter in a business, but like it was more just about that and like how many dollars can we ultimately like it. The fact that it was an agency and the work didn't like seem to matter as much. It was just much more about like, combining assets and like making cash flow. So I really liked if S4 felt like a bunch of people that were like me that like really did care about, like were like sort of nerdy about this and passionate about this, like where's the world going? How do we like build something that connects into the change that's happening in the world? And also, and this is actually something that I realized more after I sold, but was a pleasant surprise is like, I did get to be surrounded by like the sort of Avengers of marketing. Like there was like if you want to like talk about, experiential marketing or something, like something I knew nothing about, I could just talk to like the smartest person in the world about it. Like built a company, a $50 million company that does this. It's like, that's amazing. So like, anyway, that to me was very exciting and drew me to them. Also, like, it was a good deal, right? Valuation was good. Structure was fair. I thought, aside from a few little like dust ups in negotiation, I didn't feel like there was some big like trick or like, like they didn't feel like there was some other mechanism that was going to like hose me, after the fact. So, which was true. Anyway, so kind of all that combined.
Yeah, that's great. You're seeing that this is your first transaction. You're doing a transaction with a public company. So there's stock in consideration, there's cash, and there's an earnout. The stock component has some restrictions and some timings. The earnout has some performance. How did you get comfortable with those, not straight cash structures?
I had to educate myself and understand it. This was pre-AI, so I had a lot of conversations with lawyers and accountants about it. I think I just asked Claude now. I had to just educate myself on like, what does all this stuff mean? What do these terms mean? How does this actually work? And I think once I understood it, it all seemed like fair to me. Like I didn't expect someone to just hand me a giant bag of cash and then just be like, do whatever you want. Like obviously me continuing to run the company and having it continue to perform and retain our clients, it makes sense. I've always been a big incentive alignment guy. That's like a huge thing I focus on with any company. And I felt that it was generally fair. Once I made sure I was educated and understood it, I was largely fine with it.
Great. Yeah, because the uses of an earnout in the capital stack is extremely common in agencies and service businesses. Other sectors have a different take on earnouts, simply being used for valuation bridges or ways to, as you correctly gleaned, it's used as a gotcha. Like, well, then maybe it's a way to get it as a discount in case they don't hit it. How do they structure the earnout in a way that you felt confident accepting it?
I mean, it was largely just like we gave them our plan for the next 2 years, and they basically said like, okay, you have to hit this plan. And then if you hit this plan, you get the full value of the deal. So it was like, okay. It was our plan. Like, they're like, okay, so do it. And then you get all the value. And so we did. I think we hit like 93% of the earnout or something. The second year we got like, the first year we got 100%. The second year we got like 90 or something. So we did hit our plan because it was our plan and I knew we would. And it largely was straightforward in that way. So yeah, again, once I understood there was no like hidden, like chargeback or something that was going to like crush our margin and then it was going to be impossible. Like once I made sure none of that stuff was happening, again, it was fairly straightforward.
Were you already running the business from a budget?
Yeah. Wasn't like
that's another reason.
Yeah, it wasn't like a hardcore, budget. I would say it was more like a forecast and a plan that we would work backwards from. So yeah, I guess it was it wasn't like, it wasn't
departments submitting their budgets for
correct. Yeah. Yeah, it was, yeah, but it was my version of it was still like for a small company, I think a fairly buttoned up process and way of doing it. So yeah, it wasn't like a big departure for us. There was one thing, and I can probably talk about this now. There was one thing, and I'll be a little bit vague, but where, and they treated me very well on this. This was post deal. This was in the earnout, where we had essentially invested a lot of money into kind of building a business that would pay off in the future, which probably was dumb in hindsight. This was to me being still a little bit starry-eyed, acting still like just a, full-fledged, I own the company entrepreneur. Like, this is the right thing to do, so I'm going to do it. And I'm going to go spend, 500 grand or whatever it was on building this thing out, but in a way that didn't pay itself back in that same calendar year and kind of was going to hose me on the earnout. And the S4 leadership was actually very good about sort of making me whole on that, because they knew it was like I was doing it in ultimately the best interest of the business overall. So like, there's a lot of buyers that would have been like, well, sorry, tough, you shouldn't have done that. Like, you should have just been ruthless about, pinching pennies and squeezing every dollar. Two lessons there that I think are important. One is, if you get into bed with the right people, you can smooth over stuff like that. Even if it's not, you're doing things for the right reasons, but you didn't technically probably do it in the right way selfishly. The second lesson is, I probably wouldn't recommend falling back on that either, right? Like, you should still, in an earnout, focus at the end of the day on the numbers, because it just makes, you're 10xing that EBITDA number every year. It makes such a huge impact on your life. You can't like play around with it.
Oh, great lessons. So you go through the courting process. Do you remember what it felt like to sign the LOI and make the commitment?
The LOI was a big deal. To me, it felt like a step, though, ultimately. Like, it was like, okay, sweet. And then, yeah, we closed. I remember when we closed the deal. This is so lame. I'm not a big like celebrate guy. I'm just like, cool. All right. Have a glass of champagne, hang out for 15 minutes. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. We have an earnout to hit. And then you hit the first year earnout. Cool, we hit the earnout. Okay, got to start doing annual planning. We have another earnout to hit. Maybe it's lame. I didn't go to Vegas or buy a car or do anything. I just like kept like building the business.
And that also kind of goes into what you're doing now, which is you just kind of keep building.
Yeah, correct.
I want to get into that, but I want to kind of bookend the story, which is you sticked around during the earnout period, which is prudent as a founder who's looking to get more from the transaction or realize the full transaction. You stayed a little bit longer. You liked it over there, which is really a good sign for the decision you made. What did you like about joining and being an employee and being part of this business?
When I decided to leave, I left because I genuinely was retiring. Like, I was planning on just never working again, which didn't stick, but that was in earnest my plan. And I remember telling Chris, who's who's the COO and effectively my boss, although he never acted like a boss. But I remember telling him at the time, I was like, listen, if I was going to work anywhere, I'd work here. And that was genuine. I really liked it, but I didn't want to work. And if I'm being totally honest, I didn't really want to work for a company at all. Like, if I did work for a company, I would have worked there. But I was talking to a friend about this one time, and I used the analogy that owning a company is like having kids. Working for a company is like watching your friends' kids. You care about your friends' kids, right? You're going to feed them dinner and you care about their safety. You're going to be a good steward, fiduciary, right, of their well-being. But it's not your kids. It's just different. And I felt the same way. I just couldn't shake that feeling. No judgment to anyone else. But the only way I would ever work long-term is if I own my own thing. It doesn't scratch that itch. It doesn't feel important and meaningful enough. So I don't know. It's just a weird way I'm wired, I guess. But
so you close. When do you move? Because you have two events in your personal life that seem pretty meaningful. One is you have kids, and you move from Seattle. So when did that happen?
Yeah. So I had kids. I actually had we had our first child like 5 days after the deal closed.
Oh my
in
goodness,
2020,
John.
which is hilarious and like a movie or something. It wasn't planned. Obviously, we didn't plan it that way. Like it just worked out. I will say they rushed the deal at the end because I was like, I'm going to be gone for like a while, like a couple weeks at least. Like, so, you should probably get this done. And then we moved to San Diego like officially 2 years ago. So, I had a place in San Diego for a long time. It was kind of a vacation house and I always loved it. And then it was just like, yeah, there's no reason to not be here. Yeah. I mean, my company was in Seattle, right? So there was not an option. I'd escape down here for a week or two at a time. But yeah, now I live here. Haven't looked back. It's great.
Yeah. So you essentially have a new life.
Yeah.
You close on the sale of the business. You become an employee working towards performance metrics, but it's as you described, kind of an out of body experience. I put words in your mouth because it's not the right fit. You have your first child, and then after the earnout, you completely change home and start a new thing. So
yeah.
Let's talk about post Monk's life. You left to retire and spend some time with your family. How long did that last?
6 months, maybe. I always do like annual planning for like my sort of, not just my company, but like my life and what I want to accomplish. And I have like a health goal and, sort of like I have these like different sort of life goals. And I'm trying to think of the exact calendar year. It was 2023. I remember getting into the new year and looking back and saying, this is the least I've accomplished since I was probably a senior in high school in any given year. And I didn't think that would bother me because I was like fully committed to, I'm going to be the Hawaiian shirt hanging out on the beach, sleep until 10 a.m. guy. And it did bother me because I have this, the Jeff Bezos regret minimization framework, which is such a silly thing for basically just like, it's like the deathbed. What are you going to regret? Kind of exercise. I always thought, well, I'm going to regret like an opportunity to surf all day and do all this stuff and not doing it. I'm going to regret not doing that. And then what I realized is I have hobbies. I love my hobbies. I love like having time for them, family, of course. There's still a lot of time left in the day. And just sitting around listening to podcasts and scrolling Twitter and like doing that for a couple months or something is fine. Doing it for years on end and realizing that like, oh my God, if I keep doing this, I'm going to be 60 years old. I'm going to look back and go like, I hung around. I like hung around and listened to podcasts and played video games and stuff. And then that's it. Like, that's it. You wasted your shot. It's over. That was like, that really sort of messed me up. And then I started thinking about, okay, like what's the next thing? And like all these things, it wasn't a single brilliant idea that, I knew exactly what I was going to do. It was like, try a thing and then that's working and try another thing and start to kind of formulate a vision and, follow kind of a path that unfolds as you're walking down it. And that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. And it's been great. So.
Yeah. Let's introduce the venture studio.
Sure.
Now.
Yeah. So about 2 years ago, I started something called VantaFive. And essentially it's a venture studio, self-funded venture studio. It's not really venture, but it's a studio that builds and launches and grows agencies. So the goal is to launch, I would say between 2 and 4 of them a year. We've launched 5, 4 have survived and are doing well, which is pretty good. And then, we're attempting to launch 1 or 2 more this year, and then we'll see what happens next year. But I essentially have a thesis that I'll try to quickly explain this. So I have this thesis that someone else called the comet theory, but I like it. Technology drives most of the change in our world, like technological change. And when that technological change happens, either as a direct result or kind of paired with one of these big technology companies, oftentimes consumers rapidly adopt new behavior, right? Consumers actually change pretty quickly, right? You think like TikTok, right? TikTok goes from an app that, teenage girls dance on to like the most important media company in the world within like a 2-year span of time, right? So consumers kind of pick this stuff up rapidly. And what happens is because technology moves so fast because it's built on exponential curves, right? Like TikTok exists because of an algorithm, because of machine learning, because of exponential growth in machine learning progress, right? So then that all happens. And then all the companies that serve those consumers do not grow at exponential rates and are left flat-footed. There's a supply-demand mismatch between the supply and demand of the expertise around that given platform, system, domain, whatever you want to call it, depending on the specific trend. And that gap is just a classic sort of supply demand, market asymmetry. And that's where agencies should live. So the comet is the technology, the kind of, arc of the comet is the gap. And agencies, if they're smart, in my opinion, should position themselves kind of like right in that gap. So to give you a tangible example, one of the agencies in our portfolio is a full service Reddit agency. So all they do is Reddit marketing. They're very, very good at it. They have partnerships and IP and like everything just completely built around this single platform. Because what we saw is Reddit has been around for 20 years. There's basically no Reddit agencies out there. All of a sudden, Reddit is top 5 most trafficked websites in the world, and it is highly cited in LLMs. So this is going to be like a big thing really fast, and everyone's going to need a Reddit solution like yesterday. And we kind of identified that trend about a year ago, found a great founder CEO, scaled up and launched the business, and, we're a year in and it's going very well. So like, that's kind of the way I see the world. And we're launching agencies to try to, jump into these market gaps as they open up.
That's great. The former guest, Martin Lauber, a friend of mine, he has 19 York and he's incubated off of a similar model. He finds his MDs and drivers from folks who leave big agencies, who notice the trend. They're working for an agency who's not keeping up with that trend. So they go and start, the contender or the one who's going to fill that gap. And sometimes they just need a little bit of fuel, a little bit of cushion to spend the time and energy to build up to critical mass that they can then grow from. It's a great model. Peter Kang, another guest on the podcast, is Beryl. He did the same.
Yeah.
But I critiqued all of them with the same way I'm going to critique you, which is, John, why are you starting things from scratch when you could buy one of these companies and put more fuel on the fire? Why incubate versus acquire?
How do I say this in a nice way?
No, don't say it in a nice way then, John.
Okay.
Say it in the way that you think of the world.
Most small agencies are not set up in the right way and not very well run. And I'd rather just do it myself. I've looked at this. This was actually something I thought about very seriously and like started going down a path on. And I don't want to say the door's closed forever. It may not be. Okay, 2 things. First is that point. If I find a $2 million agency and I look at it, I go, I just could just do this myself in like 9 months.
Replacement costs. Yeah, you could do it quicker. Yeah.
I'll just go do it myself. I'll own the majority of it. I don't have to deal. And then the other side of it is like, I'm not, and this is just a purely personal thing, I'm not really a deal guy, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I don't know if I love, like, that's how I spend most of my time, is finding things and negotiating and doing diligence and all that. That to me was a bit like pulling teeth when I went on the other side of my deal. So I'm spending too much time talking to lawyers and accountants and stuff, I think. Just honestly. Like, I'd rather just build something like the way I want to do it from scratch. There is a possibility that this goes really well and I decide, I want to go like totally shoot the lights out and I'm going to go, raise private equity money and go like on a buying spree and apply this thesis, because there's absolutely more leverage in doing that. 100%. Like, but, for me, VantaFive is something that is also built out of constraints to some degree, like that are more personal, right, in nature, about just like, I just want to focus the majority of my time on stuff I really love and am really good at, and I think building from scratch is closer to that.
Yeah, 100%. And it sounds like you're not sitting close to these organizations. You're saying fairly chairman-esque. You want people to build and drive the organizations, and you're there to support them and help them because you have a playbook that works, and then you just want to replicate that playbook across the variety of different curiosities, interests, and ideas that light you up, which is wonderful, John.
Yeah. So I focus on building the holdco and then effectively acting as a highly involved executive chairman in the individual portcos.
What do you like about that job versus the CEO of the portco job?
It's like my dream job. All I focus on is solving problems, strategy, projecting things into the future, finding opportunities. And I do it in a way that I get to surround myself with really smart, hardworking people who I really like, because I get to choose them. And then I get to go build stuff with it.
Yes.
It's just awesome. I love it so much. I really do. I'm such a nerd. Like we do these all day, EOS meetings with the whiteboard, and I have like 7 of them in a row. So I have like 2 weeks of all day in-person meetings doing this. I love it. It's like one of my favorite things to do with my time, period. So
yeah, it's one of the highest ascensions of an entrepreneur, because you're far enough away from the businesses, because you got 5 plus and it's growing, that you can't sit on the org chart. You can't get your hands too dirty, but you get to participate with strategic leaders on the things that matter most. So like you have great relevance and great impact, although with less time.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's great.
So in kind of the bookending of your journey, it's not the end, of course, you're still actively running agencies. How is it that you're able to have other agencies, John? Oftentimes when people sell their company, they can't compete. They're pushed out of the sector. They're locked up. What's the last bit of advice you gave yourself or can give to someone else to make sure you have this type of option post-close?
Well, I mean, I did have a non-compete, right? I had to let that kind of run out, but it did. So, it was a sort of standard thing. So that's part of the reason I took some time off, to be honest. I don't want to say it was like, I can't do anything anyway, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to hang out. I would just say like, okay, it's not a direct answer to your question, but here's the general advice I would give. If you are the type of person that can build a successful business, and everyone told this to me and I dismissed them. And so I will try to really impute this, because I was the guy going like, yeah, but you don't understand, I'm different. But if you are the type of person that can effectively build a successful business, it will be incredibly hard to turn that off, because it is not a thing you did. It is part of you. It is intrinsic. Now, if you are someone and you are incredibly passionate about a nonprofit and you're going to go put the same amount of focus and effort into that, awesome, right? If there's some other hobby that is truly, genuinely that rewarding to you intrinsically, great, but be really honest about yourself or about this. Like gardening is fun, woodworking is fun, tennis, whatever. It's fun, but it's not something you're going to do 10 hours a day. Also, it's extremely socially isolating to be middle-aged or younger and just not, have a reason to work with other people. Probably the one thing is a nonprofit. If you do that, awesome. That's amazing. But other than that, you will start another company. So you should plan for that. It doesn't mean you have to do it the day after you quit your thing. You should take time off. You should go do that trip to Bali for a month or what, like do all that stuff, but don't just not have a plan, because frankly, it can be miserable. And you also, and this kind of is a direct answer to your question, if you don't think the stuff you sign matters because you're just never going to work again, it's like, who cares? Like, shut down the LinkedIn profile, sign whatever non-compete you want me to. It doesn't matter. You're being totally naive. And all you're going to do is make things harder on yourself down the road. So just have a plan. It doesn't need to be the exact company, but like, I'm going to take 6 months off and then I'm going to think about my next thing. Like that would be my advice, because, thinking you're just going to hang out for the next 20 years is totally naive. So
yeah, you're speaking to the entrepreneur. It's a vocation. It's not a job. People retire from a job. You don't retire from a thing that gets your life energy.
Yeah.
John, this was tremendous wealth of knowledge and advice. If someone's listening to this and says, John, I'd love to reach out, learn more about your firms, your agencies, or maybe doing something with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow me and DM me there if you want to connect. And, if you want to just kind of see the companies that are in the portfolio, VantaFive.com is the sort of jumping off point for that. So, but always interested to, connect with people, especially aspiring agency entrepreneurs. If you think there might be a fit to work together, that's how I've built some of the best relationships I have, is just that kind of, informal networking. So
tremendous. Appreciate you, John. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Peter.